Yeah, fine.
Welcome everyone to the Mid-Michigan Innovation Center. My name is Chris Bolger, and very happy to see you all went through the ice to get here with us today. We had about 25 registered and about half of you have showed up, so true dedicated innovators have arrived. One thing to take notice to save the date for our big annual event, heading for the big leagues at the Dow Diamond. This is the region's largest showcase of entrepreneurship, innovators, inventions, and investors in this region. Over 300 people come and gather on the concourse of the Diamond to celebrate everything that you all are doing to move Mid-Michigan's economy forward. So May 30th, it'll be I think it's 2 to 9 o'clock with different events throughout the entire day. But the big portion is the exhibition and reception starting at 5. So don't miss it. I think we'll go around the room since we've got a smaller group and introduce ourselves. We are videotaping today. If any of you wish not to be filmed or have questions filmed, don't ask about it. So that's pretty much the easy part.
Can you
We'll
post it
start
on your
here.
Facebook tomorrow?
Spencer Abs. I'm with I'm an intern with the Blue Water Angels.
Lee Hughes. I have started here called Footwork that helps with sales and relationship development.
Artie Solis, owner of Solovak Manufacturing. We protect your home and family.
Joanne Peterson, Ascension Staffing, staff for anything from general labor to engineering and computer IT.
Christopher Smith, Intake Coordinator with the Innovation Center.
Michael Wiley, President of Global Invention Solutions Services out of Midland.
Jim Rouse with Organibliss LLC. We distribute a natural organic plant supplement, Organibliss, and we are members of the Michigan Innovation Center.
I'm Danilo Sirius, son of Sirius.
Hi, I'm Bob Renton, working with Omnitech on bio-based materials for new business development. Also representing Great Lakes Entrepreneur Quest, the business plan competition here in Michigan. And to let you know, the door is open now for submitting to register for a business plan competition up until May 27th. So if you're just interested, go to gleq.org, get your name in, and get on board for the business plan competition.
What are the prizes for that one?
This year, the money's rather modest, like $10,000 to $20,000 for first place, but the payoff really is you end up with a business plan. So it's set up for companies that are either early stage, I just had an idea, or I'm in business and I want to grow bigger. So there's 2 divisions in there.
I'm Kurt White with Flight IEQ, do consulting in the field of microbiology and a few other things.
Hi, I'm Nicole Ward, and I'm in strategic planning for Mid-Michigan Health.
I'm Glenn Hallett, I'm president of RightAnswer.com, Inc., and we are an application service provider servicing the health, environmental, and safety market.
And I'm Angela Cole. I'm also with Great Answer. I'm their attorney, so they're doing pretty good.
We have an attorney on staff.
Yay!
I'm Emery Scheibert. I'm with Dendrotech. We manufacture dendritic polymers.
Great. And I have the pleasure of now introducing our speaker today, talking about strategic planning, President and CEO of Omnitech International, member of the Board of Directors of the Michigan Innovation Center, and I'm sure many other hats. I'd like to welcome Lee Rouse.
Thank you. We have like about an hour to go through strategic planning. And so for those of you, and I guess some of you are already in charge of strategic planning, you know that it takes a lot more than an hour. But hopefully we'll be able to give you a quick overview. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I actually have a mechanical engineering and a business background. So I started out my career working for General Motors and Dow Chemical, and then decided to go solo and become an entrepreneur and started up a small consulting firm. And then after 2 or 3 acquisitions and mergers, I ended up with Omnitech. So I'm happy to be there. We're a technical and business consulting firm, and we do quite a lot of different things. Bob's in the bio-based area. We do a lot of business consulting as well. So for me, it's fun because I'm one of those jack of all trades. So it's great to be able to solve other people's problems and not your own, and that's been fun for me. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about strategic planning, and I've been involved in this process for about 20 years, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofit and for-profit organizations with strategic planning. So specifically, in an hour we can't get into too much detail, and I'd love to take all of you through that process with your companies, but hopefully what I'll be able to do is kind of give you an overview of what strategic planning is. It'll be review for some of you, and it may be quite new for those of you who have been stuck maybe in the business planning stage a little bit. So just for grins, how many of you have been through a strategic planning process before? So about a quarter to half. How many of you are thinking you might want to take your organization through strategic planning at some point? Okay. So this will give you an overview of what that might look like and what the steps are that are involved. There is no right or wrong to strategic planning. There are quite a lot of different methodologies out there, but most of them have some of the same components. So I've tried to hit on the big pieces, the commonalities between all of those. And I've got a lot of examples of different plans in here, just to kind of give you a feel for what's out there as well. So we're talking a little bit about the benefits, why would you want to do it? Everybody always asks me, what's the difference between business planning and strategic planning? So we're going to touch a little bit on that too, because you're probably more familiar with that, particularly if you're a startup. We're going to talk about some of the elements that are found in strategic plans, and then a little bit about mission and vision. Some people only do vision, some people only do mission. If you take a look at them in the truest sense of the word, sometimes people's vision statements really are mission statements, so they're kind of all over the board. I try not to have people get too hung up on terminology, because really the proof is in the pudding. So it's a matter of having the elements of your plan right, whether you call it an objective or a goal or a focus area, it doesn't really matter as long as you define it and you develop the plan. So I try not to get people too hung up on the terminology. I'm going to spend a little time at the end discussing how you set up goals and actions so they line with your strategy and with the objectives you set. And probably the most important thing of all is this last one, is how do you keep your plan on track? Because quite honestly, what most people do when they first start strategic planning is they put a lot of resources into developing the plan, and it looks great on paper, and then where does it go? Up on the shelf, right? And so it never gets kicked off. So it takes a tremendous amount of leadership and dedication to do strategic planning. And I find it even in our own organization, it's really easy to develop the plan. It's much, much harder to drive the plan through the organization and to keep the momentum going. So hopefully if we can get through all that in an hour, we're doing pretty darn good. So let's just start with kind of some basics about what is a strategic plan and what is strategic planning. Ultimately, it's an organizational activity. It's usually driven by management or leadership. Often in a bigger organization, it might even have a staff of folks that do strategic planning, or they're in charge, or one person that's in charge of strategic planning. In a smaller company, it's typically the leadership or the management that will start the process. And it's used to define a number of things. It is, as I said, a tool to set your strategy. So some of the things that you do as part of that, you set priorities. And that includes both short-term and long-term goals. So often when folks embark on a strategic plan, and it used to be years ago we would do a 10-year strategic plan, you think that works in this time frame? No. You're lucky if you can look out 3 to 5 years. So most of the time when I work with clients now, we're looking at a 3-year strategic plan, and we bring it down to what are we going to work on next year. So we do the strategy for 3 years, and then we look at what's part of the strategy, and we say, what do we want our plan of work to be for 2013? So it's both long and short term. So you get both components out of that. Ultimately, you want to be able to focus the organization on what resources you have and how you want to use them. So it gives you an opportunity to use your resources in a different way. So if we have a priority to increase sales, for instance, I have to look at my organization and say, do I have the resources in my organization, both financially and maybe with manpower, to increase sales? Do I need a sales director? Do I need to have some sales lead coordination? All of those kinds of things. And then you have to look at how you want to expend your resources. Sometimes if your resources are limited, you actually have to say, I'm going to do less of this and shift resources over this way. Or maybe you need to get additional funding. hopefully it allows you to strengthen your operations. When I do strategic planning with organizations, I have them look at their processes. So what are you doing and how are you doing it, and where do you have disconnects? Where are things falling apart? Where are there stumbling blocks? If you're talking to your clients and they come back and they say, wow, every time I call your organization about a problem and it takes 3 days for somebody to get back with me, I know that's a process issue. So we have to look at why it's taking so long. So it's looking at strengthening the processes and the operations. It's ensuring that employees and any other stakeholders, maybe you have contractors, maybe you have partners, maybe you have people that you work with, are all working towards the common goals. So you're looking at some type of alignment. You know, if we set the strategy and we all agree we're going to work on these 4 things, then everybody in the organization has to somehow align what they're doing on a daily basis to those 4 key things. It establishes agreement around results and outcomes. If we all agree that we want to increase sales by 10% this year, that's our outcome. That's our focus. We're going to decrease safety incidents by a certain point. If we're going to increase the number of donors we have, if we're a nonprofit organization, or the number of members we have in our organization, or the number of alliances we have, we usually try to put an outcome or a measure on that, and it allows us to do that. Then finally, it allows us to assess and adjust the organization's direction. And the big thing is the second part, which says, in response to a changing environment. I just read an article yesterday on strategic planning, and one of the experts in strategic planning in the U.S. was talking about the number one thing that folks don't do well anymore and why strategic plans fail is because we don't look at the environment that we're working in. And we're not really trending things and seeing where we work. So sometimes we have a tendency to kind of work in isolation. Or if we think we've got a really good product, we want to get out the door, but we're really not looking outside to see how that's placed or what's going on, or what economic challenges are out there, and that causes a lot of angst for new companies and existing companies as well. So we've got to all get better as we move into all of these new areas that we're working in on looking at the environmental influences that are out there and how that impacts our business, and strategic planning allows you to do that. So ultimately, what are you trying to do? You're trying to enhance long-term vibrancy. So if you do your business planning to get you kind of started up and going, you want to do your strategic plan to set your objectives so that you can continue to grow and look at where you want to be. So the second question I often get is, all right, I get what strategic planning is, but what's the plan? What does it look like? It's usually some type of document. It doesn't have to be hard copy paper. It can be electronic. But it's some kind of document that you can use to communicate to the world what your strategy is. So it's got your organizational goals, and it's got a list of all the actions and all the things that you're agreeing on, sometimes with metrics. Some people do, some people don't. And it gives you a plan that tells you how you can achieve all those goals. And any of the other critical elements that you decided to include in your strategic plan. And I'll walk you through what some of those elements are in just a moment. By the way, if you want to get up and grab more food, feel free to do that. And if you have a quick question about something, I don't mind if you ask questions. Let's keep it conversational. So, business planning versus strategic planning. How many of you have gone through the business planning exercise? Just about everybody. So you know the common elements of business planning. What do you use your business plan for?
The road map.
Pardon?
Get investment.
Getting financing. I mean, most people do that because it's like the first thing you have to check off, right? I've got to have my business plan. I love this quote by William Rothschild on the difference between business planning and strategic planning. It kind of clearly states what they are. He says, what do you want to achieve or avoid? It's usually some type of objectives. How will you go about achieving your desired results? That's usually the strategy. And that's kind of the difference between the business plan and the strategic plan. More specifically, your business plan is kind of this great big tour of the business's operations. You go through all these finite elements that you have to fill in. It identifies the model, the mission, the objectives. It covers your staffing, your location, your marketing, your financing, your target markets, your potential for success, your competition, all those pieces that you can sell to somebody, right? So that they understand that you've got this overarching business that hopefully will be successful so that they can maybe make an investment into that or help finance you. It reviews and explains typically every area of the business. And most folks will update their plan year after year. Now, a common misconception is that everybody should have a business plan. Particularly even if you're trying to grow or you want to expand or you want to get additional financing, you need to have a business plan. So there's a reason for all businesses, regardless of whether you're 0 to 1 or you're 26 years old. On the other hand, a strategic plan kind of looks at the business's purpose, which is, this is why we exist. We exist to serve these people and provide this type of service or product in this unique way. And it gives you a vision for the future. So it gives you an opportunity to say, what do I want to be in 5 or 10 years? Do I want to be well recognized in my field? Do I want to have the #1 product in households for XYZ? Do I want to be the solution in the US for some certain problem? Whatever it is, whatever that vision is for you. And if you start with that vision, then you go backwards and you say, what are all the steps or strategies that the business will use to meet or exceed those objectives? So what do I have to work on now to achieve that vision? So this is definitely a little bit more strategic than the planning piece. So it's looking ahead at the future and kind of giving you that, wow, what's that wild, audacious goal that I want to have and how am I going to get there? The strategic plan can focus on the entire business, or what some people forget is that it can be just one element of the business. If you decide that you want a strategic plan just to grow one leg or one arm, our consulting business is pretty diverse, so we've got 4 separate areas that we focus on, and sometimes it's overwhelming for us to write a strategic plan for the entire company. So even just having a strategic plan for one area is helpful. So you can break it down into something smaller if you want as well. So this is kind of just a model, an overview of some of the major components of strategic planning processes. Now you'll see lots of other things on here as well. If you compare different strategic plans throughout the country or the world, you'll see people will have value statements and all kinds of things like that. But these are kind of the major components. Usually what happens in the beginning of the process is there's some type of an overview process where you get a team of people or a couple leaders together, or depending upon the size of your organization, you might have a committee, you might have board members if you have a board that, an executive board or a board that your organization works with. You'll have some type of a planning team. If you're really small, it might be you. You might be the team. And the second thing you do is you go through what's called an environmental scan or trend analysis or a review. There are lots of different acronyms for that. The one that stands out the most is a SWOT analysis. If you've never heard of that before, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So as part of this trend and this scan, you do an internal review. And that internal review looks at your strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute of things that would typically be data that you would look at in an internal review. And then you also do an external review. So with the external review, you're looking at opportunities and threats. What's going on outside of my organization? And you remember a few minutes ago I brought up the comment from the expert in strategic planning that said we aren't doing as good a job in that right now. We're not looking at the environmental side. We tend, because it's our comfort zone, to look at our internal data, because that's what we have the most access to. So we jump right to, well, I know what my finances are, and I know what my marketing plan is. I know how many staff members I have. And we sort of forget that we've got all these external influences out there that we really have to study and make sure that we are aware of, because we're going to have to react to them. And you see that. I mean, if you go back and look at the financial industry 6-7 years ago, when everything tanked, that changed people's strategic plans quite immensely. And those folks that were able to regroup and take a look at that ended up successful, some didn't. So that would be an example of something that happens that's a threat that would be external. Another component is the mission and vision. And I don't know, for those of you who have been through strategic planning in the past, usually when you say missioning and visioning, everybody groans because they think of being in a conference room for 8 hours and stumbling over wordsmithing mission statements, but it doesn't have to be painful. And there's a lot of information, a lot of processes out there that will help guide you through that to make it less of a painful process. But a mission is why we exist. That's essentially what you're asking. And we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. Vision is what you want to be. Where are you going to be? What is your company going to look like in 5 or 10 years? And how are you going to get there? Then we kind of have to funnel down, because it's not enough to have this dream up here and to articulate what our purpose is. We now have to have some type of strategy so that we can get to that. And that's where we get into key objectives. You can call them focal areas. I've got a number of clients that call them all kinds of different things. For the purpose of this presentation, I just put objectives. So what do you have? What do you want to work on? What are those 3 to 5 key areas that you think are the most important and critical for you to address in the next 3 to 5 years? And then from each of those areas, what are those short and long-term goals and actions? And who's going to do them? And when are they going to do them by? And what's the deadline? And then what process do you have in place to evaluate the success of the plan? Are you going to look at it monthly? Are you going to look at it weekly? Are you going to drive it home in some type of a staff meeting? Are you personally going to take it on? How do you drive strategy? How do you drive those action plans so that people continue to work on the business? And that's the whole entire cycle right there. If you've got metrics, like I want to grow the business by X%, I'm going to do it this way, you might have metrics that you look at. You might have a dashboard. Lots of people use different types of metrics and measurements, and I'll show you a couple examples of that as well. Questions or comments to you? Everybody with me so far? All right. So I'm going back to that internal review. So this is the strengths and weaknesses. So if you're starting a strategic plan and you're wondering, what kind of data do I look at? These are just some examples of some of the types of data that you can look at. You might look at financial trends. So you might look at you might trend out your financial statements from the last 2 or 3 years. You might look at revenue. You might look at sales. You might break down sales. One of the things we do is we look at sales leads. Where are the leads for new business coming in? So that when we're looking at spending money on marketing, we can allocate our budget to the things that give us the most bang for the buck. So you kind of are doing your own little data mining of your organization. You might look at your operations. What processes are running really well? Which ones are not running well? Can I be more efficient and effective if I do something in a different way? If you have employees, you might do an employee survey and find out what their perceptions and their trends and their trends are. What do they like? What are they not finding? You might do a salary survey. Am I paying? If I have a retention issue, maybe I find that my retention's like 50%, and I need to figure out why people are leaving. So you're looking at some of that data. You might decide to do some stakeholder analysis here. And I just finished a big strategic plan in the last week for an organization in town. We did interviews across the entire city of Midland. So we took a look at, they're a community organization, so we interviewed a cross-section of leaders in the city. We also did 6 focus groups. So there were 6 separate constituents that were attached, or stakeholder groups that were attached to their organization. One was a volunteer group, one was a certain type of user, one was a certain type of donor, one was a non-donor group, to try to understand why would they maybe not participate. So you can do some focus groups, you can do surveys, you can do, and you know, you can do surveys in all different ways now with technology, right? You can do them on phone, computer, internet, and whatnot. So you can collect data that way. You can look at work processes, we talked about that. You can look at customer data. So if you have a product or a service that you're selling, if you've never asked your end users how satisfied they are with the product and with the service that they get around the product, that's probably a good thing to do. You can do it verbally, you can do it in meetings, you can do it in surveys, so there's a lot of ways of collecting that data. So these are just some examples, and I'm going to show you a few that I took right out of strategic plans. So here's one trend, total clients served. Wow, we had a dip in 2010. Why? That's some data mining we need to go look at. Here's just an example of a survey. Customers, or this happens to be a staff survey, looking at communication and support and suggestions and the mission and how well they feel they're compensated, to try to give them an idea on how satisfied staff members are. in the organization. Here's just a graph of internal expenses. You know, what are our expenditures like? What is our revenue like? How are our operating facility expenses? What are personnel expenses looking like over time? You might look at staffing levels. You know, how is our makeup? Wow, I didn't realize that we had, out of 126 staff, only 26 were full-time. Wow, we changed over time. It used to be different. So it's looking at all those different types of trends, looking at funding sources, household penetration. Kind of whipping through these pretty quick because I just want to show you some examples. But those are the kinds of pieces of data that you collect for yourself when you're looking at an internal trend analysis. And then you can stop and say, okay, after I've looked at all the data, I'm going to step back and ask myself, what are our strengths? What are we really good at now that I've looked at that? What might our weaknesses be? Wow, we decreased in this area. We need to look at why. The second half of the SWOT analysis, or this trend analysis, is looking at an external review. So what kind of data do you go and look for? A lot of this is going to be specific to your field of expertise and where your business is. If you're in healthcare, you're going to be looking at a lot of healthcare data, right? You're going to go outside, you might be benchmarking against other hospitals and other systems that are your size. If you're in a tech company, you're going to be looking at technical data, or tech data. You're going to go to trade organizations because you can get a lot of it from there. You might be looking at demographics. If you're doing business in Midland County, you probably want to know what the ages are and what the employment rates are and things like that. So you're going to look at demographics. You're going to look at business trends. You might look at competition. How many other organizations around here compete, if any, or nationally or on state level. You might look at economic challenges. I always tell people to look at best practices and look at benchmarks because there's a world of information out there. There are a number of centers for excellence for different trade organizations that collect wonderful data, and a lot of it you can get for free. Look at local, state, national, and international data. If you're looking at exporting something, you better know what's going on, right? Somewhere else besides here in the state of Michigan. And again, I can't stress enough that there are so many different centers for excellence, trade organizations that are affiliated with most of our businesses that they have a tremendous amount of good information. Now, if you're doing something totally new and exciting, it might be a little harder for you to find that information. But you can certainly get some of the other pieces. So what does that look like? I just threw a few in here. If I am selling a service to the aging population in Midland County, I want to make sure that there is an aging population in Midland County. So I might trend out and look at that, and I can say, wow, since 2000 to 2020, that's increased. This might be a good market for me to go after, right? I was looking at some data yesterday just on, this is totally different, on ice rinks, for instance. Like we've got 3 sheets of ice down here. And the number of kids in hockey has dropped by 50%. So I might not open a hockey store here. It's looking at things like that. If you're in the technology business, you might want to know what the top 10 strategic technology trends are for 2013 and how they impact you and how that would work for your business or how it might change your business. If you are either a small business yourself or you are providing to a small business, you might want to know what the optimism index is. You might want to say, wow, plans to make capital outlays are up 21%. That impacts me because I need the capital dollars, right? So you're going to look at those types of trends. You might look at employment trends. How are we in Midland? How are we in the Great Lakes Bay region? How are we in the state? What does that look like? Does that affect me in terms of getting employees, or does that affect me in terms of supporting? Like with your business, that would probably be something that affects that. If you're in social media, you might want to know how people use social media. Is it for marketing? Is it for customer service? If I'm in the crisis management business, this tells me that they aren't using it very much for crisis management, right? So there's all kinds of ways to data mine and collect data that will help you set your strategy. So those are just kind of a few examples. I mean, I've got thousands of them, and you've probably got quite a few that you can think of now that you've kind of been sitting here. But that's the kind of stuff that you need to pick up when you're looking at strategic planning. Okay, you've collected all this data. You've got a pretty good idea of all the data mining internally and externally. What do you do with it? At that point, you usually pull it together with your team, or if it's yourself, and you create an environmental scan with it. So you're looking at all this trend data, and you're going to say, now that I've kind of analyzed the internal pieces and I've analyzed the external pieces, I'm going to create a SWOT analysis, and I'm going to look at what the strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what our opportunities are for the future, what some of the threats are that I might have to be aware of, and I'm going to create a SWOT analysis. And typically, these are some of the types of things that come up. So I've got some examples here. They aren't going to be the same for your organization because you're all different. But the things that would come up maybe as a strength, and sometimes they come up as both a strength and a weakness if they're good at one part of it, bad at another part. You might say, wow, we've been really financially stable. That also, if you're not, that could be a weakness too. We've got good trust and reputation with the clients that we have. Quality of our product and service, we know it's really, really good. We've got longevity, we've got history, we've got a great staff, we've got great quality of our product. You know, there's good knowledge in the community or the community in which you sell or participate in, whether that's on a statewide, national, or international level. It could be that you know that you have a really good, diverse range of offerings, and that's meeting the market needs. Things that come up typically under weaknesses, a lot of times visibility, knowledge, and communication come up. We don't do a good job of communicating everything that we do, or people don't know that we're here. Here's one that could be very specific. Wow, we get complaints on our customer survey data that the length of time from order to delivery is too long, or the rework is too much, or they can't get a hold of somebody. Maybe we have work process problems in a certain area, or there's a perception out there that our price is too high. We know it's not, but the perception's there, so we have to deal with it. We have to figure out how to market around that. Could be customer service issues. Those are the types of things that will come up under weaknesses that you'll have to deal with. If we take a look at all that external data, these are the types of things that will come up under opportunities and threats. Could be that we see a really neat new niche for marketing, a new venue for us to get our product or service out there. And we can expand our target market into different demographics. We might be able to get a new location. We could be able to utilize a talent pool in a different way. Unfortunately for us in this area, we've had a number of layoffs in the last couple of months. Well, if you're in the business of hiring people, that might be a really good opportunity. And so trying to figure out how you utilize some of that talent would be a good thing. From a consulting business, it's great when people get laid off because we look at the talent that's out there to see if we can pull them in a different way. It could be your diversity of your board or your staff. It could be regulatory things. Those, for us, we're in the regulatory business too. So when a new regulation comes out, we're happy about that. Nobody else is, but we are, because usually if we have expertise in that area, it means we're going to have some consulting dollars to help people get through the regulatory piece of that. So that's an opportunity for me, but for the business that has to deal with it, it's a threat. Layoffs, economic uncertainty, regulatory issues, new competition, tax implications, labor, HR issues. One of the projects that Bob works on, and we get dollars, our client gets checkoff dollars from the government. It funds part of the work we do. If that went away, that would be a huge implication for us, and it would be a threat for our business. So it's looking at all these types of things. Could be, funding, incentives, those kinds of things. So you get kind of a feel for the types of data to look at and how that equates down into your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All right. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of the components of the plan. We've done this SWOT analysis. So one of the first things that comes up typically in a strategic plan, one of the first things you create is a mission statement. And some of you might already have those for your organization, some may not. I love this one because it says, that's our new mission statement, more. And how many of you walk into, I love doing this, if I walk into a new organization for the first time, about 90% of the time the mission statement is framed in the lobby, right? And if you ask somebody to recite it, nobody can. Because it's usually 6 paragraphs long and it's, written 10 years ago and it's sitting there with a little dust on the top. But your mission statement should be reviewed at some frequency, just to make sure it's still relevant. And what is it? What it is simply is just a statement describing why you exist. That's it. Why do you exist? So if you look at it more specifically, it talks about what it is that you offer to whom. That's why you exist, right? It allows you to, but why you have it is because it allows you to focus on what's important. It allows you to prioritize what to do. It allows for conflict resolution if people are wanting to go off in a couple of different directions. I find most organizations, if they can go back to their mission and it's still relevant, it allows for a lot of conflict resolution because people will have scope creep, right? And if you've got a lot of really creative people in your organization, it's really easy to want to go in a ton of different directions. And sometimes you have to stop and say, well, really, what is it that we're here to do and why? And then you send yourself back again. It prioritizes where you spend your resources. We already talked about that. And more importantly, it creates alignment. Because we want everybody to agree why we're here, what's our purpose. Sometimes it forces you to look at your business and get out of parts of it. We've done that. Our business is 27 years old. We have reinvented ourselves 3 times. We are in the process of reinventing ourselves a 4th time. I'm sure our mission will change at some point again, and we may not do some of the things that we're doing now. We used to be in the staffing services business. We don't do it anymore. And that used to be part of our mission. So you will reinvent yourselves over time. So if you are creating a mission statement for the first time, these are the types of questions you ask yourself. Who do you serve? Who are your customers? What do you provide? What makes you unique? What issues are you facing? And how do you deliver? And if you wrote the answers to those down, you would probably have enough information to craft a pretty darn good mission statement right off the bat. So here's some of my favorites, and I try to pick some that I think are kind of inspiring to some degree. And a lot of them have mantras or elevator lines or whatnot right below. And so Coca-Cola, they exist to benefit and refresh everyone they touch. So their mantra is refresh the world. Red Cross to help people prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies. Pretty straightforward. You know, you think of Red Cross, you probably think of that. Stop suffering. Air Force to defend the U.S. and protect its interests through aerospace power. Kick butt in air and space. So this is kind of like their behind-the-scenes mission statement. Southwest Airlines. The mission of Southwest Airlines is dedication to the highest quality of customer service delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, and company spirit. And I love their mantra, better than driving. So you can kind of get an idea when you look at what the most important thing is in terms of mission statements. I think if you keep them clear and concise and short, they're better. But some people have really long ones because they've got a lot they want to say. Some people incorporate values into them, and that's fine as well. And then those are just some questions when you're done writing your mission statement, you can use them just to check it. All right, how does a mission differ from a vision statement? A vision statement is a description of the future. And often when folks go through this exercise, their vision statement looks almost identical to the mission statement. So you really have to get out of the box a little bit and force yourself to look ahead and think about, if this is something I am not yet, what should it be? Maybe it's to be the best in something, maybe it's to be recognized, maybe it's to really be the top performer, whatever it is for you in your niche. Why do you have it? That's what gives you the direction ultimately. You have to have something to work towards. And that's what your vision statement is. It gives you an opportunity for framework and selection of resources, a little bit like the mission does. But really, it allows people that work with you to be excited about where they haven't been yet. You know, we're all working towards this. It's relevant. We want to get there. So these are some sample vision statements that I really like. I used to do some work for Avery Dennison, and I loved their vision. It's to be the world leader in products, services, and solutions that enable and transform the way consumers and businesses gather, manage, distribute, and communicate information. And I love the word transform in there. I thought it was enable and transform are really powerful words. I like Anheuser-Busch's, be the world's beer company. Through all of our products, services, and relationships, we will add to life's enjoyment. And you can see that in their ads, can't you? And you see that portrayed out. Chevron. At the heart of the Chevron way is our vision to be the global energy company most admired for its people, partnership, and performance. So when they looked at the vision, they thought, we want to be global, but we want to be most admired. And why do we want to be most admired? By our people, our partnership, and our performance. Nike, in the 60s, I thought this was interesting. Their vision statement was to crush Adidas. And now it is to be the #1 athletic company in the world. Sears, to be the preferred and most trusted. So that was a really important word for them. Resource for the products and services that enhance home and family life. So you kind of see how vision statements are a little bit different than mission statements. They don't just say, you know, we are the world's biggest provider of, you know, housewares. It's, we want to be the preferred and most trusted. Now, in order to get there, they have to be able to measure that, right? So that gets to be a little bit harder. So you've got your objectives, or you've done all your SWOT analysis, you know what your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats are, you've got a mission statement, you've got a vision statement, now you've got to write your strategy. So the next thing is to start looking at priorities and objectives. And you can call them whatever you want, but those are the focus areas. And so right off the bat, if I threw this question out here and I said, you all have, I think in your mind, some vision of where you want your company to go. Give me one thing you think you need to work on to get that to happen. Just a general thing. Anybody have one in their mind?
Find an investor.
Pardon?
Find an investor.
Find an investor. So the financial sustainability is probably one of the biggest things you need to do to get there. With somebody else. One thing you need to work on.
Grow the market.
Grow the market. Sell more, right? Get new people interested in it. So we all have probably these 3 to 5 key things that we know we have to do differently with our businesses to achieve the vision that we have. Those typical areas of focus, those objectives, usually around financial sustainability, getting funding, sales and growth. Like Emery said, it could be around people. One of ours in the last year was around people. I knew that we had to change our workforce, and I knew that I was going to probably turn over 75% of my staff in the next 3 to 5 years. So finding the right type of people was hugely critical. Marketing and communications usually is a pretty big one for a lot of people. And usually it's something around whatever you deliver, whether it's a product, a service, a program, there will be some component of that in the strategic plan too. So it might be technology enhancements or improvements or quality, those kinds of things. But usually for most organizations, it's 3 to 5. So you get all those in, you know your 3 to 5 key areas you want to work on. Now you've got to build the strategy down. And I tell people it's kind of like layering an onion. You know, you've got the strategy on the outside, you're going to the next layer, and you're going to the next layer, and you're going to the next layer. So this is what needs to be done. There's all different kinds of forms and templates for doing this, so I don't have 50 of them up here. I just have a real simple one. It's what are you going to do, who is going to do it, and when are they going to do it? So if I pick on you with funding, finding an investor, that's one of his key objectives. Financial sustainability for the company, one of his key goals is to find an investor. What are some of the things you have to do around that?
Finish my business plan, meet with various investors or partners.
So you're pitching it, you're selling it, you're identifying who to go pitch it to. Yep, exactly.
We got states that are giving us orders and we've got nothing to build because we don't have the finances for startup.
Yep. So he's working on a startup plan. And the finance piece is the most important thing. Growing the business,
Go to market.
growing the market. What are some of your actions and activities around that?
We'll do some market research.
Market research, yep. Trying to figure out where your product could play, who else might be interested in it, where can you grow it, collecting some of that data. Who's gonna do it, when are they gonna do it, who are they gonna do it by, who do they report back to? What's the plan? You gotta have the actions to support the objectives. I've got a couple of these in here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I just really wanted to show you that some people have indicators on there. Some people call things differently. You know, some people assign them to a certain program or department team. But most of them identify the actions in a date, and they talk about who's going to do them. Here's an example. You know, when you get to the point where we're trying to put it all together, so we've got all this data we collected. Sound like a broken record. We've looked at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've identified our 4 focus areas or objectives, and we've got some action plans or initiatives. What does the plan look like? There's a ton of different formats for that. I threw a couple in here just so you can see. This is a really simple one. Instead of a mission and vision, they just say their purpose. You know, and it's more of a vision statement. They want to be recognized as the absolute best pressure regulation supplier in the process control industry. They're going to focus on 4 things, those 4 things. These are their quick goals or initiatives under those 4 things. And then what they would have are supporting documents of actions and specific activities that they're going to do to increase quick change regulator lines and expand the range of the QPRO line. And then they've got some performance indicators or measurements down here so that they know what it looks like. You know, if I do this, new product, we're going to have new product and I'm going to be able to measure it by the revenue per month that I have. If I'm increasing sales, right? They're going to go up or they're not. But that's just one example of what a plan could look like. Here's a much more detailed plan where it's got vision and values, strategic goals across the top. Got all the initiatives listed here, which are kind of like goals. Increase merit and needs-based aid to recruit and retain the most promising students. And then it's got metrics and progress indicators down here. So it's just another way of looking at it. This is a format I use, and this is one I did last year. I just updated it actually. And this is for Midland Center City. I picked something you might all be familiar with. You know the circle area in Midland? It's called Midland Center City. So they have their own funding, they have their own group, and their mission is to provide an environment for success that leads to sustainable economic growth in the Center City area. Their vision is Midland Center City, a destination of choice with endless possibilities to eat, shop, and explore. They know they have not achieved that vision yet, right? So you probably know they haven't achieved that vision yet. But they're going to work on 3 things: the physical infrastructure, a strategic marketing plan to increase awareness of the corridor, and governance and sustainability. And they've got goals. They then have an action plan for each of these goals. So that's another way of looking at what a plan looks like. Here's the same plan with details, and this is actually a plan of work for last year. So they took their strategy and said, all right, there's only a few of us here. We only have a certain amount of resources. What can we possibly do next year in alignment with this strategic plan? We're going to commit to those actions under each of those goals. And you know what? We're going to assign a team to do that. So we know that we've got somebody assigned to those actions. And then when they meet together as a board, they review that. So that's just another example of how you can kind of simplify a strategic plan. Now some plans, if you're part of a really large organization, your strategic plan might be 50 pages long. I mean, it could be. So we are almost at an hour. I want to give some time for questions, but I want to talk about one more thing, and that is monitoring the plan, because this is the part that most people do a poor job of, myself included. You need to incorporate reviews of the plan into some indoctrination part of the organization. So it needs to be part of a staff meeting or board meetings, or if you're all by yourself, then you need to force yourself to pull that out and look at what the status is against the actions that you set. You gotta change the plan. If an environmental factor comes up that changes the way you do business, maybe it's something economic, maybe it's something in the market, you need to be able to go back and react to that in a more proactive way and change the plan as opposed to just ignore it. You might have to redirect some resources, but the biggest thing is to stay focused. And if you've got people that are part of this with you and you do really good things, reward the success. And make sure you revisit the plan yearly, like the overall big plan, and those are some key things. You can look at a dashboard. I threw one of these up here just so you can see there are all kinds of different templates for how well are we doing. Do we want to have a dashboard against our goals, our actions, our status against our plan? You do all kinds of things like that to look at providing some mechanism for measurement of the plan and your success against the plan. So, last slide. Why do strategic plans fail? Why does the process fail? Sometimes folks will put a plan in place because they heard it was a good thing to do, so it's having a plan for the sake of having a plan. It doesn't work usually if you're not committed and you just have the plan. This is the one we talked about earlier, not understanding the environment or focusing on the results. And something comes up and you just really didn't look at it, and it's critical to your business. Commitment levels vary. You know, you might get an organization where people work independently, and so commitment levels vary across the organization. And so you might have some folks that commit to it and some that don't. I see it fail when people have planning teams and the team members, bosses, or leadership don't provide them the support and the time to go work on the team for planning. Not having the right people involved. You don't have the decision makers and the folks that are going to be impacted by some of the plan's actions. That'll be a problem. Developing a plan and putting it on the shelf. You know, this is great, we did all this work and we're going to put it up here and we don't have time because we're focused on working, right? It's to work on the business or in the business. And we all deal with that. Unwillingness or inability to change. Sometimes we're just stubborn. And we choose not to take the path that our plan might outline for the best plan. Could be that we have the wrong people in leadership positions. And I'll tell you what, that's a hard thing. If you're the leader of the pack, if you're the CEO or the president, and you've had people, maybe family members or other folks that you have hired, and you have to really step back and look at it and say, maybe things have changed and I don't have the right people in the right positions, and I've got to change leadership. And that's not fun to do, but sometimes you have to do that for the better of the organization. And this is a huge one too, no accountability or follow-through. If people are not held accountable to the plan, including yourselves, then it doesn't go any further. And a lot of times we just have unrealistic goals. And so we put this grandiose plan together, but it really doesn't match with the resources or the time that the organization can spend on it. So those are some of the main reasons why they fail. So in 1 hour, we've talked about an overview of strategic planning. You've learned all of the elements of the plan. You've learned what a mission, a vision is, what objectives are, how to write action plans, maybe how to do some metrics, and you've had some examples of what the plan looks like kind of in an overview. I didn't know that I could get through this in an hour, but we did pretty darn good. So let me throw it out to you. Any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned in strategic planning that to ensure that the employees and other stakeholders are working toward common goals. How do you get an outsider, whether he's a vendor or somebody like that you need to be part of your organization?
You know, that's a good question. It's a tough one because they may not want to spend the time in strategic planning with you, but what they will do, if you sit down with them and have them be part of one of those stakeholder groups, like either on a personal interview or even if you had a number of vendors, invite them in as part of the focus group and think about the questions you want to ask. I always ask things like, how easy are we to do business with? What, if you could change anything about us, what would it be? What are you getting, what's going well with our working relationship? What's not going well with our working relationship? How much communication would you like from us? What would you like to change if you could? What do you see as our strengths? That's how I pull those people in. because they don't probably want to spend the time to be part of the planning process, but they will give you an earful about how best to work with you. So really good question. Anybody else? Yeah.
Lee, you touched on it pretty good, but your general sense of who really is the proper people to put this kind of documents together, things. Is it best done with an outside facilitator, or can you really do it with in-house people on a hit-and-run basis?
Well, I'd love for you to use an outside facilitator. That works really well. But you can do both. It really depends on whether you have somebody that can participate and facilitate. And I know even for me that's hard to do. So you have to ask yourself, can I participate and can I be a neutral facilitator to the process? And can I participate with the content? And larger organizations have folks whose entire jobs are to do that, right? So you kind of have to decide on the size of your company and whether you have the expertise in that company to do it. And there's lots of different models. I mean, you can have somebody come in and do, I look at projects I've worked on where I've had to do the whole external analysis for somebody, versus another client where they'll say, we really need to, we have limited resources, we want you to do the facilitation, we'll collect all the data though. And it's worked out great because they know their business better than I do, so they know where to get some of that data. Or, if they might have access, they might already be doing customer surveys, right? Or interviews and things like that. So we can data mine that data pretty quickly. Versus if you've never done any of it, then you're kind of starting from scratch.
In turn, if you had a really good facilitator, you might raise your hand. What kind of time would that take, and what kind of costs would be involved in it? Not counting your internal cost of diverting people.
It depends on the size of the organization and how big you want the plan to be and how much data you collect. You can do an initial strategic plan in 4 to 8 hours. You can pull data together, it depends on your size. All the way to, if you want a very in-depth plan, you might spend 3 months or 6 months and have a team of 8 people or 12 people working on it. There really isn't any right or wrong. It really depends what you want your outcomes to be, and it depends on whether you've done it before. So if you're revisiting a plan, it's a lot different than if you are creating a mission from scratch and a vision statement from scratch and putting all the elements in place. Depends whether you have a business plan in place too. Yeah.
A lot of times you'll get somebody that they're head of the business and they're too focused and they have no clue. And so in their mind, they're right.
Yes.
And you need an independent person to say, hey, you're...
Yes. You do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of problems not understanding your environment and change. And let's say you're going across a field that's newer. At what point is it that you just need to kind of get exposure to your environment so you understand where your value is before the value of what we need to get everything on paper?
You need to get out there as quick as you can, right? Because the more exposure you have, the more exposure, you're going to collect information both ways too. And if you're doing something brand new, I guess the competitive problem is you don't want to get out there and have everybody look at you too, right? Because you want to stay on, because you want to stay under the radar. So that's a good question. I don't know that I know the right answer to that. What do y'all think? I'll throw it back to the audience. I mean, you want to go out and collect some information about what you're selling, right? Or what your idea is to some degree. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But you don't want to give it all away either.
We'll make an assumption to what your value is to the people you were presenting to, not knowing that because it's so new. And then let's say they jump right on it and they say, I want this strategic plan, I want this, I want that. And having to say,
I don't have
this
it.
is how we found out without having this relationship, this conversation,
Yeah.
without building assumptions.
We've just recently experienced a situation where we grew very rapidly and we were kind of flying under the radar. And we had good clients and steady clients. And once we hit the market and now the market knows who we are, it's a very different environment to be working in.
Yeah.
So the plans change, the marketing changes, and
Staffing probably changes.
So it was a huge leap.
Yeah, the learning curve is
How many
pretty steep.
employees are you up to now?
Yeah.
9 employees and 4 contractors, 5 contractors. Then we went from 2.5,
In what period of time?
a year.
And so his growing curves, if you looked at his strategic plan, probably people management is gonna be a huge element, because as you get bigger, you start having to put people processes in place, and you start having to deal with people stuff too, right? And that's different than when you didn't have people that you had to deal
Right.
with.
Yeah, and then add an international business. that you
And,
can
yeah,
have.
we went from pretty much local to a very large international
Right.
business.
More than 70 countries, 27 distributors overnight.
Overnight.
And that's huge. And a whole different set of
A
problems.
whole different set of problems.
Tax issues like you
And
would.
licensing and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
What a problem to have.
Other questions? I'll stick around too. I don't want to keep it too long because I know you've been here an hour and you probably have to get back to work, but I will stick around, and if you have other questions, please feel free to stay. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to
Thank you
tie
very
up?
much. A couple of things. Tomorrow is our first Best Shot sales pitch competition. That'll be in this room starting at 5 o'clock. We have, I believe, 10 entrepreneurs, including a few from this room, that are competing to not look for investment, but to get their first customer or a customer. So it'll be a 4-minute sales pitch competition. We'd love to have you come and participate. We'll have wine and some food and things like that. The Innovator Spotlight is the 3rd Tuesday of every month. Please come back and join us for the next one, who is
Ted Lunt.
Ted Lunt, founder of Adventure Golf, Med Audit, and a few other companies. So he's always a blast to have here, and just as good as Lee. So thank you again, Lee. Thank you all for coming. Remember May 30th, and hopefully we see you tomorrow night. Have a good day.